So once again, I'm here with the Sarah Wiseman. How you doing, Sarah?
The Sarah Wiseman. Hi.
Well, there's only one.
I mean, there's a few, but thanks.
Am I sitting with the best one? That's the question.
Let's hope so. Let's
Hello.
go with that. God says I'm the best to him, so
That he does, and you're the best Sarah Wiseman I know.
Oh, well, that I'll take it. The best Matt Beckenham I know.
There are two
Are there?
in Australia.
Oh, really? There's a famous Sarah Wiseman actress.
Really?
Yeah, my auntie's like friends with her.
Oh wow.
Never offended. Get this right. My old name, Sarah Gibney. My brother married a Sarah, so she's now Sarah Gibney. And then I married into a family of Wisemans, and there was already a Sarah Wiseman. So I was like, identity crisis much. I'm making it my own.
Yep. Well, let's ask that question. Who is Sarah Wiseman?
Who am I? Oh man, I'm just a whole lot of heart and thought and depth, and my foot's in my mouth sometimes. My heart's on my sleeve, and I just want to love people really well. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you've heard me say before, if we're all part of the body of Christ, I think I'm the tear ducts. I'm a crier,
Yep.
I'm a hugger, um, and I'm a mother, and I love being a mom. I love my kids, but sometimes I'm cranky.
Mhm.
Had a cranky week this week, if I'm honest. And yeah, I'm an open book.
Well, that's kind of what I want to ask about. In our first YouTube video, we spoke a little bit about vulnerability, and that's how I
Mhm.
met you, and how you the way that you speak. How important is vulnerability to you?
It's everything. It's well, if you're not vulnerable, if someone's not vulnerable, you're not dealing with who they really are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and life's just so short. It's too short to be anything but sincere and authentic. And for me, I don't know if vulnerability and authenticity mean the same thing, but to me, they do.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you can't really know somebody if they're not vulnerable. And having said that, I know it's hard to do if you've been hurt or trust has been broken or whatever. But for me, I got to this point of it's just hard not to do
Yeah.
because I want people to really know the real me and I want to really know the real
Yeah.
version of others. But man, it hurts when people don't like it,
Mm.
right?
Yep.
It's like, yeah, there's this saying, I'd rather be loved for who I am than liked for who I'm not,
Yeah.
which is like all good and stuff. But sometimes I'm like, oh, it's actually really painful to be hated for who you really are. Like,
Yeah.
it's easy to fake it sometimes and protect yourself. But
So you managed to do this in a very, at times, fake world or a pretend world or a facade world.
mm,
Like, what makes it? Is the word easy? Would you say it's easy?
no,
No.
it's not easy. I mean, I will find myself wanting to perform sometimes. I think it's the flesh, it's like human nature.
Mm.
Even in my stories, sometimes I'll do some stories and be like, that's not who I am. What am I doing? And then I'll redo it and I won't post it because I'm like, no, like sometimes it takes effort to get to the core of who you really are. Because there's this self-defense, I think, um, that just pops up and goes, don't tell them everything. Like, because when they judge that, it'll really hurt. But so yeah, it's not easy, but in the long run, it's harder to fake it. It's so hard to pretend, because you got to keep that up, and that's exhausting. And when I've had like seasons of falling into like the habit of like not being fully authentic online on Instagram, and I just start to feel like, why is this so hard? And
Yeah.
then I have a bit of a wake up call and go, oh, because you're just not. It's normally when the opinions have gotten so much that I start to just quieten myself down. And then when I'm finally like, stuff it, just being myself, it's like, oh, I feel free again. So yeah.
I love how you just said that. It's when the opinions get too much and your voice gets pushed down.
Yeah.
It's like we're listening to every other voice other than the voice that flows from within us. And
Mhm.
so often we're looking for other voices to validate our own voice. It's like a dog chasing its tail a bit.
Totally. It's interesting because I was listening to some worship before we came on tonight in like an attempt to get my head into a space of not correcting little people and actually like focus. And all I had was this verse in Second Corinthians. We, just so people know, we had no idea what we were going to talk about. Like we've got to discuss one thing, right? And the scripture I had was, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, and in difficulties. And that part about I will boast all the more gladly about my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest on me.
Mm.
Like, that's kind of gone over my head before. Like when we are fully vulnerable and authentic about how weak we are, his power can rest on us more.
Mm.
And I think there's a lot of people out there thinking, if I just project God's power, if I just like ham it up and
Mm.
say the right stuff, his power will come. And it actually seems to be the exact opposite.
Yeah. I think that ties in so strongly into the concept of vulnerability too, because I think Christ modeled vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
But so often in our culture, we think vulnerability and weakness go hand in hand, where I think
Yeah.
Jesus showed to us that vulnerability and the ability to be who he is became the defining moment for lots of people to go, there's something about this guy that these Pharisees, they don't carry the same authority. And that's where I think with Jesus, the vulnerability, the authenticity statement, when we challenge into those areas, all the people that are faking it, people will see that coming from a mile away.
Yeah.
And I think in our culture, at times we think we're tricking people by pretending to be something else, but
Yeah.
people are smart, I've found.
Me too. This is what I've realized. It's like, I think we're all a lot smarter than we give ourselves credit for. Like, we actually know when someone doesn't fully like us, but
Mm.
then we think, oh, maybe that, or we know, we can feel it, like it was in all of us to know when we're receiving authenticity, but it's like we don't trust it, or but then when we see someone else being authentic, it's refreshing. So why don't we all just do that?
Yep. Well, it takes courage too.
Yeah.
And I think like when people marvel, and even when I've heard you share, I marvel at your courage that you carry in these moments, because again, it's not just something you wake up and go, okay, vulnerability is going to be an easy thing to do today. It's often a choice.
Yeah.
And I wonder, Sarah, how long is it a choice before it becomes our normal? And that's just the way that we are. I wonder how many relationships do we have in our world and life where vulnerability is our normal? What do you think about that?
um I think it takes work, like we said. um but I actually think it's a handful of really big, what would you call it, fork in the road moments,
Yeah.
you know. um for my husband Tim and I and our relationship, I know he'd be fine for me to share this story, but back when we were dating, our relationship was terrible. It was so bad, and we used to fight all the time. Like, but we were so we felt so much shame about it,
Mm.
and we were so, and I'd love to say we've come a million miles from there, but look, there's still it's still like, it's still hard. Relationship and love, it can be hard,
Mm.
but back then it was like really bad. And I'll never forget, one night we had this big row, whatever, and I was like, just go home. And we were both heated, and I was like, we were dating, so he lived somewhere else, and I was like, just go. Anyway, he, in his anger, I know a lot of men who have like given some walls a good old fisty cuff, whatever you call it, but he just happened to pick a brick wall. So that was intense. And yeah, we ended up going to the hospital. It was like a whole deal. It was so intense. And I remember we were both sitting there because we were like, we can't tell people at church, they'll all judge us. One will think our relationship's right. They'll think we don't really love each other. And it was like this fork in the road of like, we were making up lies. We were like, we'll say you did this, or maybe we'll talk about this. And then I then was told to go wait in the waiting room because I wasn't allowed in there like in the middle of the night because whatever, it was sleep time. So I'm trying to sleep in this waiting room and he's in his room and waiting to get stitches or something. And we both prayed about it and we were like, we just can't lie about this. Like we just have to tell the truth. Like, and I felt God say to me so strongly, if you lie about this, you'll be lying for the rest of your life about so many things. And it's a very steep, curve to go down. And so I came back to him and he just looked at me and was like, we can't lie. And I was like, that's what I thought. And so it was the most humbling experience to go to church the next day. And we were like so ashamed, so embarrassed. We felt so like bad and stupid and whatever. And he had this giant cast on his hand, right? So it's not like we could avoid questions. And everyone first saying, mate, what happened to your hand? And he was like, I punched a brick wall. And people's faces were like, what? Why?
Yeah.
And he's like, we were having an argument. And we were like, so we got two responses. There was either like, cool, man, that's cool. People would kind of walk away. But the majority of guys turned around and said to him, mate, I've done that before. Like we were shocked at not just the amount of men who said it to him, but the caliber of men, people you would never expect. And from that point on, we were the people that everyone came to if they had an issue where they were feeling ashamed or broken or their relationship was struggling. And because they knew like, oh, these guys I can talk to, there's no judgment, and so sorry, that's a long answer to your question, but I feel like we come up into these walls in certain times of our life where God's like, what are you going to do? Are you going to choose authenticity and vulnerability, or are you going to choose to keep on going down that path of pretending? And I feel like the more we choose vulnerability, the easier it becomes because we see the fruit of being our true self and not hiding. And yeah, that's just, for me, that's been my journey, is just saying, okay, no, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be honest. And as hard as it is in the moment, you see, this is why I feel like my DMs are full of people coming to me saying help or thank you, or I'm struggling, because they know that I won't judge them, hopefully.
It's such an interesting thought. They know that they won't judge me. When I was a teenager, it was when Nicky Cruz was sharing his great testimony and story, and people were coming to Jesus from hearing that. And I remember as a teenager identifying as an evangelist and going, my testimony, my story is not enough.
Wow.
And so I embellished it. I stretched it. I used real experiences in my life, but I stretched what they meant to me and what they did. And people felt sorry for me in that, and when you share it. And it wasn't long after that where I felt God say to me, it's truth that sets people free.
Oh, wow.
And it was just like, and then the concept was, your story is as important as Nicky Cruz's story. And it started me on a journey of discovering who I was. Like, and way back in those days, we didn't have people around to mentor you into helping you understand your identity, your design, and all that sort of stuff. And so I stumbled around for a number of years just trying to work that out and trying to hold on to truth and lose truth. And but it became that mess of a concept to go, unless we actually land in the places of truth, like that's John 8, my truth will set you free. And every time you lie or you conceal the truth, it's like you wrap yourself up in another vine that tangles you up. And in marriage, it's so easy to do that at times, that you get too busy, the kids are too noisy, and all of a sudden you find yourself and your partner entwined with these lies or these half-truths. I don't even know if half-truth is a proper phrase. It should probably just be lie. But there's Jesus going, guys, truth is the very thing that sets you free. I remember when, Patricia, my marriage, it collapsed when I was 38. And I had a very real fork in the road, like you talk about, as to here it is. You can choose to hold on to a fence. You can try and prove to the world that you're correct and right and all that, or you can suck it up and you can actually hold on to what you know you've done, step into that place of truth. And I'm here today, even sitting here with you in a place where truth is like it's one of those foundational pieces of your life.
Yeah.
And it's become that because I've learned and felt and encountered the freedom that flows from the place of truth. Like one more example, I had a man come to me the other day and he says, I'm just asking for a friend.
Love that old chestnut.
He says, my friend is watching pornography. Should I tell him that he has to tell his wife?
Oh,
and I'm sitting, like I'm laughing.
Yeah.
Now I shouldn't be laughing, but in the concept there, I'm sitting with the guy and say, wow, your friend, there's a reason he's watching that. And how about we talk with your friend about why he's watching that? Because not everyone watches it for the same reasons. Maybe there's a void, maybe there's something inside of that, a distraction. I don't know. Like, let's talk with your friend about what that is. And what I was trying to do, if this was him and not his friend, was lead into a safe place where truth could be something that's expressed.
Yeah.
And to me, when I ask the question, is vulnerability easy? It's easy if love is present. It's nearly impossible if condemnation is present.
Right.
There's a classic example of where love overwhelms condemnation in Scripture. It's the woman who cries on Jesus' feet. She walks into a room where everybody has judged her. As soon as the doors opened, like, look at that woman.
Yeah.
They've declared that she's unclean or a prostitute or whatever they want to do. They then judge Jesus because Jesus should know who this woman is, and she's touching his feet, which is making him unclean. But in that moment, the love of God did something so profound that vulnerability became the conversation that was there. Vulnerability undid all the condemnation that was actually in the room and allowed this woman to do this extraordinary act of love and leave knowing that she is loved, not judged.
I love that. Yeah.
To me, this should be our normal experiences,
Yeah.
not just in church, but anywhere.
Yeah.
And I see moments like that as so prophetic, where Jesus says, a woman who has been forgiven much will love much.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And forgiveness for me is that it's a beautiful act of God that we can actually bring into the relationships that are around us, where we allow our love to heal the wounds that have been caused.
Yeah, right.
How do you feel about that?
I've just had like this big light bulb moment because I have this like deep desire, and I sometimes feel like saying it sounds a bit, I don't know, obnoxious or something, but I just have this deep urge to love people, like to a fault sometimes. Like school pickup, I just want to meet all the mums and be like, hey, like it's like, even if I want to hold it back, I can't. But when you just said, she who is forgiven much loves much, and I know that's where it comes from. It just comes from the fact that like God forgave me when I was just the ugliest, and I was the worst and worst and worst. And that is, and he still continues to do that. And that's where my desire to love comes from, because it feels like it's not like this false humility thing where I'm like, oh, I just love everyone. It feels like this deep urge. I'm like, it hurts sometimes because I'm like, people don't love me back. But I realize that must be how God feels, and how he's just constantly there, available to love people, and he gets rejected all the time. So I always try to come back to that. But yeah, it's because I've been forgiven so much and I've been loved so deeply by him. It feels like there's no other option in life, And when I start to really betray myself is when I'm like, no, I'm going to be offended or like, no, that hurt. I'm going to be something other than who I know God's made me to be. And my heart can get a bit hard. But that story that you told about the woman washing Jesus' feet, is that the one with the alabaster box?
Yep.
That's but have I told you the revelation God gave me around
Yep.
that?
You tell me.
It was like mind-blowing, right? So like maybe years ago, I was doing this online course thing, I guess, with all these women. And this, I was unstacking the dishwasher, right? And because God can talk to mothers anytime, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I was unstacking the dishwasher and I was thinking about that story. And I prayed and I was like, God, I want to be like that woman. I want to be that woman who just pours out perfume and gives you her best. And, that's a noble thought. And God was like, I want you to be the jar. And I was like, sorry, what? And he said, I see you like the jar, the broken open jar.
Yeah.
So, and he said, in your breaking, because I was in a hard time and I was feeling pressed and I was feeling broken at that time. And I felt God say to me, in your brokenness, the perfume of who I am can still flow and will still flow. So stop trying to be unbroken, stop disqualifying or discounting yourself because you feel broken, because out of that brokenness can come a sweet fragrance of like God's love and his presence and who he is. And so that just blew my mind because I thought I want to be this like woman. And he's like, you're the jar, just be the jar. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And that kind of, I guess, brings me back to that vulnerability, is it's just this jar of like,
Yeah.
this is who I am, and hopefully God's presence can just come out of that.
I love that revelation. As you were speaking, the concept for me is that the Sarah that found herself broken is the Sarah that sits in front of me today that's restored and been restored. Like there's this beautiful process inside of you from when I met you a couple of years ago to even the woman that you are today, the extraordinary mum and all that sort of stuff that you are today. You can see the transformation that's within you. That's your story, that's your testimony. And now what you're doing is prophesying from your testimony.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
I've seen God do this, and I believe God can do that for you.
Yeah.
And I love that concept of prophecy because it flows from a place of authority,
Yeah.
because you've seen it, because you've experienced it.
Yeah.
And when we talk about love is, you can't fake love.
Yeah.
And people often say, well, how do you teach love? And I don't think you can teach it, because I think you actually have to encounter it to understand it. Like I can tell you how good it feels. I can tell you the power of it. I can tell you that it can drive away fear. I can tell you that it overcomes sin. I can tell you it creates safe places. And I believe people heal by love itself. I can tell you all those things. But until you actually encounter it, then it becomes the life-changing moment. And for you, with that aspect of forgiveness, so whatever's happened in that beautiful, mystical, miraculous moment where you've realized that forgiveness has actually flooded through your spirit, it's like God has poured his love on you, and whatever that ugliness is that you call yourself, I would never say that about you, Sarah, whatever that ugliness was, it got washed away. And the brilliance of who Sarah is today, like it starts to be established. And as you then start leaning into this concept of love, I have this belief that love is the transformational act of God. So every time you love somebody or something changes, something shifts. And so when Poppy comes and sits on your lap, or I see her on Instagram, I can see the love of mother to daughter, but I can also see the love of daughter to mother. And in that moment, you're transforming by the very love there. She's transforming by the love that is there. And it's this beautiful generational aspect of, now that we've seen it, now we can prophesy it. And so last time when we recorded, you prophesied over women, mothers, daughters, probably sisters, and all concepts of that. But that flows from a heart that understands forgiveness and restoration, Sarah. It's absolutely beautiful.
Oh, thanks, Matt. What are you doing? I'm gonna cry. Thank you. That means a lot, because I think we can get, I specifically can like not see the restoration, because because a new thing pops up and you're like, oh, like, because if you constantly want to grow, you can get in the habit of constantly feeling like you've not grown,
Yeah.
enough. And so to hear you say that is a good reminder to look back and just be like, oh wow, I actually am doing a lot better than I was back then. And yeah, it's an ever evolving process of just changing and just seeing that in other people, I think, as well. Like you talk about for us being forgiven, and so then forgiving others. I feel like when we are being transformed, there's more capacity to have grace for the transformation of others. Like
Mm.
um looking at other people who, and this is how the way you bless me so much, and my husband and our family is like, it's like you look at us and you see who we are meant to be, even
Mm.
if it's not who we are. That's how you see us. Like,
Yeah.
because you understand that transformation is a deep work and a long work, but it's like you've lived it. And so you're able to look at someone and go, I don't care what you're dealing with right now. I know who you are. And I
Yeah.
know you're in a process and you're transforming. And that for me is one of the coolest things about experiencing, like you said, grace and like, you know, redemption for yourself. Is it's like you can look at someone who looks completely hopeless to some others and go, no, there's hope there.
Mm.
There's redemption there and there's a story there. And that for me is one of my favorite things, is to meet people and pull that story out and like see it come to life and see a person come to life in the love of God. It's amazing.
See, in my language, that's what you're actually doing, is going from testimony to prophecy,
Yeah.
because you're looking for the glory,
Mm.
because you've known the glory.
Mm.
It's hard to call out something if you've never experienced it or known
Yeah.
it. And this is where, like, even in the day that we live, I think there needs to be more people like you that are willing to take the time to really get to the heart depth. You know, when Jesus says, don't judge by what you see, but look beneath the surface,
Mm.
that's you.
Oh,
That's
and you.
absolutely you. Like, and you may not see it all, but like, let's let people into a secret of what happened tonight before we started. Sarah's like, how you going, Matt? And I said, oh, doing okay, doing good. And she's like, that sounds like a lie. She called me out, but that's the beauty of having a friendship, that you can actually say that sort of stuff to.
Mm.
Because if you feared in that moment, you would go, okay, he said he's good. I'm not going to actually challenge that, even if I feel like something's actually not sweet in the soul.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of who
Mm.
you are. And because we have a friendship,
Mm.
you're allowed to do that.
Yeah.
You're allowed to call it. Like,
Yeah.
it's up to me then. That's the fork in the road to go, no, I'm just going to keep lying to Sarah. Even though she's discerning something, I'm going to tell her discernment is wrong and I'm fantastic. Or I could just go, hey, yeah, I've had some challenging stuff come up,
Yeah.
and the testimony to prophecy stuff that you do just naturally happens. You don't go, I'm about to get prophetic or I'm about to testify. You
Right.
go with that place of presence.
Mm.
I cannot tell you how much what you do is like Jesus to me. Like, that's the
Oh.
point. Jesus didn't say, hey, we're about to go prophesy right now, so let's just get our prophetic hats on. He's
Yeah.
like, I'm hungry, Zacchaeus, let's have some lunch.
Oh, I love
And
that story.
there he is. He's
Yeah.
having lunch with this
Yeah.
man. We don't know what went on at the table. What we do
Mm.
know was the outcome from the table. And
Mm.
again, Zacchaeus walks into that place, and greed was the language that people used around him. He walks out, and generosity is the language that people use around him.
Yeah. Wow.
That's very powerful.
Nation happens when you sit at the table. That's so cool. It's
Yeah.
like that doctor who came to our house that night.
Yeah.
Probably too long of a story for this, but yeah, it's like for you, I just want to know in your case, right? Because you obviously do the same thing, but do you feel like there's a shift in conversation or in the presence or something when you're like, oh, this is an opening here? Like, how do you shift into like the prophetic? Does it just happen naturally, or do you feel like certain circumstances you feel are released to go into that space?
I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. I don't know of a time when a person you're talking with doesn't want to hear who they are.
Wow, yeah, that's so good.
Like, there are times when people are so guarded they won't let you into that space, and so you know that you're just bouncing up a brick wall, and
Mm.
you can tell them that God loves them, and you can speak into that. But when a person starts a conversation around something to do with their day or life, I'm listening for it.
Yeah.
There's a psychological understanding to that, that when you meet a person for the very first time, they give you 3 opportunities to listen to them.
Wow.
Subconscious, but if you don't pick up on the language or the words that have been spoken, they will
Mm.
subconsciously go, oh, Matt's not interested.
Mm.
So one of the first times I met you, I listened to you speak about Poppy and Teddy and Abel, married to Tim, and all these things are very important information for me. So when I sit down with you, I want to know what Poppy's up to. To
Mm.
you as a person, you go, oh, he's remembered not only my name, but my daughter's name.
That's so true. When people remember my kids' names, I'm like, oh,
Yep.
wow.
And I used to say, Sarah, that I'm really hopeless with names. What that meant in my language is I just wasn't good at hearing or listening. And I
Wow.
have found in listening to people, they give you every opportunity to speak into their spirit or into their life. Every one of it is unique. So sometimes it's somebody saying, oh, I've had a dream. And I'm like, oh, okay, I interpret dreams. How about we have a conversation around that? That's a deal breaker for most people, because people want to know what their dreams mean.
Mm.
Like when I sat down with you the first time, I would have rolled out the language and conversation of, Sarah, you undid me with the vulnerability that you walked in. And I couldn't stop crying when you were speaking in that very first time. Why? Because I could see your heart.
Mm.
You gave me access in that stage. You gave all of Lana Voss's world of who you're ministering to access to this extraordinary heart that knew forgiveness and love. And she was carrying her kids in there, carrying a marriage in there, and she was doing such a great job with every part of it. And she allowed us to listen to hear what love does in your life, and then effectively in people's lives. I just sat there absolutely gobsmacked. I don't think I'd ever use that phrase. There you go. Makes me feel old.
No,
Anyway,
I say it, so
do
I'm all
you?
done. Yeah,
It might be a Queensland thing.
yeah, maybe.
But that's the thing, Sarah. Like, it's for me, it's how we listen, and you listen really well too.
Mm.
Like, you wouldn't have picked up on me saying I'm okay or I'm good and gone, no, I think that's a lie. You
Yeah.
would not have done that unless you listen
Mm.
well. I think the challenge, if I can just say one more thing, the challenge that many people bring into your world is that they don't want to be seen, and so they try and deny what you have seen, and you go, "Ooh, maybe I've got it wrong."
Mhm.
And there's a constant record that can go in your mind, going, "Oh, I've got another one wrong. I've got another one wrong." And what you're coming up against is people not willing to pull the curtains back and
Yeah.
allow them to see who they really are.
Yes, that happens all the time, and it's one of two things. It's either that people are like, no, I'm fine, or I can feel that there's something, and I just get a brick wall, and so I have no choice but to be like, oh, maybe I was off. A lot of the time I'm like, well, not a lot of the time, but sometimes I'm like, okay, you're not ready to talk.
Hmm.
But then other times, so it can actually anger people. Like my friend said to me one time, she's a very blunt friend. We all
Hmm.
need one of them. She said to me, Sarah, you make people uncomfortable. It's like, oh, what? That's not like what you ever want to hear, especially when you want to love people. You're like, but I just want to love everybody. And she said, yeah, but because you confront everything and because you're open and vulnerable, it makes people who aren't ready to confront their own stuff very uncomfortable. And so they just reject you because they're like, that's too much. I'm trying to keep it together over here. And
Hmm.
you being like that is upsetting me because it's messing with my plan to. And she said the way you see into people, and you would get this too, Matt, like your ability to see into people's hearts means you see things that they're not ready to talk about or not ready to confront, and you think people are rejecting you as a person, but they're just rejecting the opportunity to face their stuff. And that was a real mind-blowing moment for me where I was like, oh, like if that's the kind of uncomfortable I make people, I'm okay with it, because
Yeah.
Jesus must have felt that like all the time. But still sucks sometimes.
I
Yeah.
think that would have been daily for Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. But isn't that what prophecy is? Like it's just seeing into people's hearts with God's eyes. And it's uncomfortable. Like it's but when yeah, I don't know. I'm confused because when you're on the receiving end of prophecy, it feels so good. But I think people are just afraid of because what you and I know what comes with vulnerability is freedom. Like you said, the truth sets you free. But the enemy's biggest lie is like, oh, that's too much. That's too uncomfortable. Don't address that. That's going to make you feel bad. And it's not true.
No. And I think we've been taught to protect ourselves more than we've been taught to reveal ourselves as well.
Yeah.
And so again, when someone gets too close, we'll push them
Yeah.
away. Often counsellors say we use anger to do that. We
Yeah.
push them away because we're getting too close to the surface. And
Yeah.
I've often found that, like even in my own marriage or in relationships, when emotions start getting to the top, people often run away from that because they start getting a little anxious or they start getting angry or frustrated. And what it means is you're coming to that next stage of breakthrough, that if we can work through this, that we can then receive more in the relationships that we carry. And so often when people say you make me feel uncomfortable, what it's doing is bringing those emotions to the surface that they've never had any way of dealing with it other than using anger or shutting down. What we're doing is giving another option here, which looks like freedom and looks like love. And for
Yeah.
lots of people, Sarah, they just either have never experienced what true love actually is or
Yeah.
love God actually is. And so they guess at it. And most of the guesses that we have around love are usually revolve around Hollywood rather than God.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. And it's just this, I mean, grace is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like, I always think about Jesus washing the disciples' feet, and which is like a powerful story on its own. And I remember I was asked to speak about it one time in like a connect group for church. And I was like, yeah, I can do that. Like, I know that story. And then God said to me, I want you to wash everybody's feet there. And I was like, excuse me? He's like, you're taking a bowl and a towel, and I want you to offer to wash everybody's feet. And I guarantee you the first thing they'll feel is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And he's like, grace is uncomfortable sometimes. And I think that's why we hold back from running to God with our shame or our dirty feet, because like it's true. Like it took everyone was like, no, please don't. And I was like, but if you can't let me do it and I'm just a mere human being, how much harder is it for you to take your mess to God? Like to place your dirty feet in front of Jesus and let him actually wash you clean. And it was the most powerful night. I was crying the whole time. People eventually let me, someone left. I was like, each to their own.
Yep.
We were all in tears. And I said, as I'm doing this, I want you to imagine Jesus actually washing your feet right now and get comfortable with that uncomfortable feeling. And it taught me, if nobody else, like that the enemy tries to make us feel too dirty to just be vulnerable with our mess, or too ashamed. But that's the moment Jesus was displaying in that day. He was saying, this is what it looks like. No matter how you feel, let me do this and do this for each other.
Yeah.
And that means being willing to see other people's stuff and washing their feet, like it's really actually not that glamorous.
No.
In real life. It's not Hollywood. It can be messy.
Yeah. I think that's part of the point too. Like we don't want in our world, we don't want our lives to be messy.
No.
These are, right?
And that's why when people say, how are you? And we go, yeah, good. Because we're like, first of all, we're like, oh, look, I probably don't want to burden you with all my stuff. But at the same time, it's like, oh, does this person really care? Do I really want to like say, oh, I'm struggling? But when I said to you, that doesn't seem right. And you were like, actually, I'm struggling a bit, I was like, oh, now I feel like we're talking, like, it's
Yep.
like you said, it really connects you with people when there's like vulnerability going both ways is powerful. And I think the enemy hates it and God is all for it.
Mm.
And so I think that's, maybe this is a question I want to ask you, but like, do you think it's possible to just prophesy from a place where there's a lack of vulnerability? Or I don't know, I guess like when I'm asked to preach, right? I know a lot of great stories and stuff, but God's like, no, I want you to listen. What am I saying? Like,
Mm.
I feel like preaching is just prophesying, right?
Yep.
And that's why I tell my story. And that's why I open up about my imperfections and I talk about my challenges, because I'm like you said, it has to come from experience. And sometimes when people are preaching, I'm like, can you tell me how you learned this?
Mm.
Like, tell me about you. I want to know, is that normal? Or like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's, well, let me be vulnerable.
Why not? It's the theme.
Preachers, worship leaders can use their platforms to hide very much behind. So
Mm,
if you can preach well or if you can lead worship well,
mm,
people don't ask questions about what's
mm.
actually going on in your world and your life. And
Very.
before Tricia, our marriage did go into crisis, I was leading people to Jesus like you wouldn't believe. I was baptizing people. It was an amazing time as far as ministry was concerned, but internally I was dying. Internally I was disappearing, and I was hiding behind my guitar, and I was
Mm,
hiding behind the pulpit because I could preach and people would come to Jesus, but at the same time internally. Since then, Sarah, vulnerability has become a much bigger conversation for me,
mm,
and my whole world has shifted from outcomes of how many salvations did I do or how many baptisms do I do to who am I loving.
yeah.
And it's that simple. And so how many people have I led to Jesus? I have no idea.
Mm,
I've not kept count, and I'm not going to. I'm not going to, because God keeps putting another person in front of me that just
yeah.
needs to be loved.
Yeah.
I've found if there is an easy way to prophesy, it's to love well. You can't prophesy without love. And I've been
Yeah.
working on this thought bubble, Sarah, about healing. That
Mm,
healing without love, is it really even healing? Forgiveness without love, is it forgiveness?
mm,
And there's these little thought bubbles in my head just to go, you know what? The church has told us or commanded us to forgive,
mm,
but really, are we going to love somebody that we're commanded to love, or are we going to love somebody that the Father allows us to see their heart? And that's where some of this language for me has shifted and changed, and it becomes very easy for me to sit with somebody that I can see their heart and to speak the
mm,
words of life over them. And so, like, even sitting with you, as I've done many times before, you pull the curtains back and you allow us to see. So what
mm,
am I seeing? I'm seeing many young ladies who find themselves in places of shame, who are wrapped up entirely in the concept of the guilt of the things that they've done. And I see you as one who goes with like a shear to cut those vines or curses off people's lives. I see that you not just do that, but you go to the root of where that vine actually came from, and you actually pull that thing out of the ground and you show it to the girl to say, this will no longer grow around you. I see that with you. I see you creating a new generation of people that surround you, that come from that place of looking at the ground to see the things that have been pulled up so that new things can be planted. I see life flowing. I see life flowing from Poppy. I see it flowing from all of you, all your children, Teddy, Abel. But I see it flowing deep down inside of your spirit as you come and you sit beside and you look these people in the eyes, because you know as well as I do, when guilt is controlling your world, you lose the ability to look somebody in the eyes. And I can see you, Sarah, lifting faces and allowing people to see your eyes, to show them that I love you. I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to condemn you. And you know what it's like if you lift up your face and somebody's judging you, you can see it in their eyes. But when you lift up their face and they can see your love, it changes everything. Love changes the atmosphere that surrounds us. And Sarah, that's what you do.
What is happening? Are we meant to be talking about prophecy? Just prophesying. That's so beautiful, Matt. Thank you. That's the desire of my heart.
Yep.
100%. I remember years ago when Tim and I were first married, just struggling so badly with insecurity. And I remember, like, I couldn't leave the house. It was so bad. I thought he was going to leave me and cheat on me. I was sure of it because that was my experience of men in the past. I just couldn't see a future where I had a devoted husband. I couldn't see it. And I remember in my room in the dark one time, and I was like rocking back and forth, like just suffering, you know, like just sitting in the darkness, consumed with insecurity, and just saying, God, why? Like, why do I have to go through this? And he showed me this sea of faces of women, and they were all crying. And he said to me, you're going to overcome this, not just for yourself, but for all of them. And I said, that's what I want, God. And whenever I found it hard to fight from that point on, they're the women I pitch in. And I thought, I'm not just doing this so I can be free, but so we can all be free, you know? So that's crazy that you just said that, because I just want to look women in the eyes and say, like, I see you and you're loved and you're worthy. I'm starting with my daughter, you know? Oh, you're ruining me. Thank you, Matt.
It's my pleasure, my friend. I know we're just about run out of time, and like you said, Sarah, we had no concept of where we were actually going to head with this conversation, but there's more to come. And so if you're watching this channel, this is something Sarah and I spoke about, of just not doing the whole marketing thing, just allowing people to gravitate to the sound of what God is doing in and through us. So there's more yet to come, and we trust that some of these talks will help you discover who you are and also your voice. Remember, from your testimony comes the ability to prophesy. So what you overcome in life, God is showing you that you have authority over those things in life. Sarah has given us the most beautiful example of the concept of forgiveness and restoration, and now when she prophesies, you hear it every single time.
Thanks, Matt.
Our pleasure. Well, we'll be back soon.
Yes.
And looking forward to doing more of these with you, Sarah.
You too. See you next time, everyone.
And if you want to catch Sarah, it's Mummy Mission on Instagram, or you can find Sarah Wiseman. There's a few of them, but there's only one Sarah Wiseman. Mummy Mission, Queensland, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. See you soon.
See ya.
Connect with Greater Things International on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, or at greaterthingsinternational.com.